What's up, Chucky boys? It's me, Chucky the Boy. Today I wanted to give you all a quick tutorial on how to use this windshield repair kit from Rain-X. I've used it before. If you can see right here, I got a little crack in my windshield that I patched up. Doesn't make it invisible, but it definitely keeps it from getting any worse and potentially having to replace your whole windshield. So we got two little chips that we're gonna be working on today, but first, let's see what's inside this thing. Like I mentioned before, I have used this kit, so I know that it works well, and I've been happy with the outcome of it. I'll go ahead and show you the front and back here in case you want to read it. Maybe you're thinking about buying it, but let's actually get into what's going on inside the packaging. All right. Okay, so first off, we've got the instructions kit here. It's gonna come with these plastic sheets. You have to keep these. You need to hold on to these. That's what we're gonna be putting on top of the epoxy after it cures. In the actual instruction sheet, you'll feel a little bit of something right around here. That's actually gonna be a little razor blade, and that is also very necessary. You can leave it in the packaging for right now, but we will use that later on. And of course, keep the instructions, because I can only say so much in a video. Now this thing right here, this little spider looking boy, it looks crazy, but this is the actual applicator. So the way it works is you set this up on the windshield and you screw this piece in on top, right above the hole that you're trying to fill with epoxy. Then you put a little bit into this top piece, if I can get this undone. Put a little bit in there. And this is actually kind of like it increases the pressure, so it forces the epoxy into the crack that's on your windshield. And you'll see that process. I'll get some close-ups here in a little bit. But that is going to be the applicator. Of course, we've got our little epoxy deal right here. I keep calling it epoxy, but it's technically resin. But this is the stuff that's actually going to be going inside of your windshield to make sure that the crack doesn't expand and make sure everything's held together. And it looks like that's pretty much it. So let's head out to the car. I'll show you all the cracks that we're dealing with, and I'll give you a better close-up on the crack that I fixed in the past.
It's probably going to be a little difficult to see on the screen, but you can kind of see that little chip near the green mark there.
So what I've done is I just put some paper on the inside of the car with a little bit of green marker on it. And that's just to help with this process, because as we're doing this, sometimes the visibility can be low. I'll show you this other one on this other side. Right here, you can see that one. There's a little bit of stuff down in there. I mean, I don't know. I might not even show this clip, or maybe I'll get some better photos later on. But something I like to do before I start actually applying the stuff and fixing the window is I like to just clean the whole surface off, because it can make it a lot easier to apply later on. Now that we've got our surface cleaned up, we can start with step one. First step, you're gonna need to grab your razor blade. If you're following along in the little paper manual, I'm basically gonna be doing the exact same thing that it says to do, but I just find videos more entertaining, so I figured I'd do this a little something for y'all. So first up, we're gonna get our razor blade out of this packaging. Once you get your razor blade out of the packaging, make sure you hold on to that, because we are gonna be using this razor blade later on to clean up the windshield after the resin dries. So make sure you hold on to it so you can store your razor safely. But for right now, we're gonna get in here and we're gonna use this little corner on the blade. We're just gonna scratch at the crack. And you're probably thinking, that makes no sense. That's gonna make it a lot worse. What we're actually doing is we're removing the tiny broken pieces of glass that are still sitting inside of the chip. And the reason that's important is because if we don't take those out, once you repair the windshield, you're gonna have a very sharp piece of glass that could ultimately just bring back the problem that you're trying to fix right now. So again, over here on this side, we'll just scratch it where the main chip comes out. And see, right there, we're getting some little glass flakes coming out of that. So that's why this is very important to do. So we're gonna finish up here, and now we can head on to step two. Make sure you put your razor blade up in that safe little container so it doesn't cut you later on. Step two, we're gonna apply the main applicator piece with all the suction cups. And what you're gonna wanna do is that hole in the middle, you're gonna wanna line that up with the crack in your windshield, just like I've done here. It doesn't have to be exact, you want it to be pretty centered up though. And once you've got it there, you just press all these suction cups on, double check to make sure you're centered up, and that's looking pretty good. So obviously we are going to do these one at a time. I'm gonna put all the resin in this one, and then I'm gonna do the exact same process on that other crack in my windshield over there. But for right now, let's get on to step 3. Step 3, we're gonna take the second part of the applicator, which is the larger kind of bolt side of things. You still have the plunger here, so you don't want to use this yet. We're gonna be using the thicker one. And pretty simple, we're just gonna thread that into the applicator to make sure it's all good. And what we're gonna do while we're screwing this in is we're gonna look in through that crack. I might try and zoom in if it's clear, but you're gonna wanna make sure that the actual point where the chip is in your window is in the center of this hole now. So I'll screw that in and I'll show you what that looks like.
Another thing to keep in mind while you're doing this is you can see that little plastic piece coming out of the bottom. You wanna press it up against the windshield, and once it gets tightened down, you wanna keep twisting it to force pressure. And you can actually see these beams lifting up a little bit. That's exactly what you want.
You want there to be a decent amount of pressure up against the windshield to ensure that all the resin actually gets forced inside of the crack and not just out the sides of the applicator. But with that done, let's get to step 4. All right, right before I tell you about step 4, I need to make a very important warning. So you see right here, we got the sunlight ending right here, and I've got my car in the shade. Now that is very important because this resin actually uses sunlight to harden and become similar to glass in your windshield. So if you do step 4 and you're in the sun, it's basically just gonna screw up the entire thing. It's gonna make it very difficult to fix. So make sure that you're in the shade when you cut the resin open, and then also when you're applying it to the window. With that said, you can see right here, I've already gone ahead and I've cut the tip off of the resin. You can see that little plastic ball down in there. I just used the razor blade to cut off the end of it, and we're in the shade, so we don't have to worry about anything getting messed up. But we are gonna take this applicator right here, and we're just gonna we're gonna put this all the way in there, and we're gonna drop 3 to 6 drops. So just a tiny pinch, and that'll be good to go. Now, with that done, you can grab the plunger, this piece here, this little thin piece, and we're gonna push that inside, and we can start screwing it down a little bit. So we're just gonna screw it down until we get some pressure on it, right about there. And now at this point, we're gonna look underneath. We're gonna look underneath here at that little gap and make sure nothing is squeezing out. If anything does squeeze out, it means we need to tighten this piece. But it looks like we're pretty good. So I'm just gonna tighten this all the way down here until it stops twisting. There we go. All right, so now at this point, that little chip should be completely full of resin. And now I'm gonna show you how to take this thing off and then make sure that it doesn't get damaged before it hardens. So obviously the first step, you're gonna unscrew that main piece. And this is just another little tip. All these little plungers, if you buy this specific kit, are gonna have this little tab on it. You see that little tab right here? So if you pinch that and pull up on it, that's the easiest way to get the suction cups to disconnect. Just pull up and that's it. And now, if we look up close, it's gonna be very difficult to see any chip. You're just gonna see that little pool of resin. And that's exactly how you want it to look right before we get to step number 5. This is when those thin plastic sheets come into play. So the crack on my windshield is pretty small. I mean, you guys saw it earlier. I'm not gonna need that entire huge piece of plastic. So what I did is I used the razor blade, or you can use scissors, and I just cut out a smaller piece that will fit over this chip a little bit better. Now, before we put this on, we're actually gonna take the same resin that we used a second ago that we put inside the applicator, and we're just gonna put a little bit extra up here on the windshield, kind of wipe it around, make sure it gets all over. And now we come in with this piece of plastic. We're just gonna lay that right on top. And you see how it's kind of binding to the glass there? The liquid's spreading out. Give it a tap, swirl it around. And at this point, that's all we have to do. Now, as soon as we back this up into the sunlight over here, what that resin is gonna do, it's gonna start hardening and reinforcing the crack inside your windshield, ultimately repairing your glass. So at this point, we're pretty much done. I'm gonna go set up the camera and get this second one done, and then we'll take a look at the aftermath. Make sure it's all nice and dry. We don't want any water getting inside of this crack. Now, same process as before. We're gonna take the applicator with the suction cups, and we are gonna center it up right above the crack in the windshield. It might be a little hard for you guys to see, but you just look for the main crack or the main chip. And if you have a crack in your windshield, you do the same thing. You just obviously have to move it over and over again. That's what I did right here. If you can see this crack in my windshield, I repaired it in the past. So you center it up on one point at the end of the crack, and then you just slowly move it back and fill the gap little by little. But now that we've got this centered up right above that hole, we're gonna do the same thing as before. We're gonna make sure we take this plunger out of here because we need it to be removed for this step. Screw the large bolt in, and before we tighten it down all the way, we wanna look inside of here and make sure it's centered up with the hole that's causing the crack. Tighten it down until it presses up on the plastic. Make sure it's really solid against the glass. Then we come in with our little resin friend, give him a couple drops. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll be generous. We'll give him 5. I'm feeling generous today. We take our plunger, drop that in there, and then we just start screwing it down. And what's going on is this plunger is forcing all of that resin to try and fight towards the bottom. And when it gets to the bottom, since this is pressed against the glass, the only way that it can go is actually into the crack, because that's going to be the easiest way to escape. We tighten it down all the way, and there we go. Now we can back this piece off, and once we get this out of here, we'll take a look and see if the crack is filled. And I can see right now that we're looking good, so I'll go ahead. We're gonna pull up on the tabs, disconnect this from the windshield. There we go. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but we actually had a little bit of extra, which is not a problem. That's not going to cause any issues. It'll just dry up and we'll clean it off later. But I can see inside this crack that we are good to go. So I've already cut out a little piece of plastic. We're going to put a little more resin just like the last one. And then we will collect this, slap it on top just like that, move it around. You want to really avoid any air bubbles inside of this. You want this thing to really get solid against your car. So we center that up, maybe push on a little bit, some love taps, and there we go. So that's pretty much it. Once you get that done, all you have to do is let it sit in the sunlight and let that resin actually harden. And once it does harden, it turns into kind of like a white layer. It looks like dry super glue. And I'm gonna go park my car, and if we can get it done today, I'll show y'all what it looks like when it's done. Just parked my car over here in some direct sunlight. This stuff takes about 5 to 10 minutes depending on the time of the day and kind of where you live in the world. We're gonna leave it out here for probably 20 minutes just because it is a little bit later in the day. Let it get some extra sunlight. I'm gonna clean all this up and we'll come back out here in about 20 minutes and check on it. I've got my razor blade. Like I said, we're gonna leave it here earlier because we are gonna need it, and this is where we need it. So you can kind of see the outline of that piece of plastic that we put on there earlier. So we're gonna take this blade and we're just gonna slide it up right underneath that plastic. You can see it's lifting it up there. And once it's up enough, we can just go ahead and peel it the rest of the way off. And we're gonna set that aside for right now. You can see there's still a lot of residue on the glass. So you just come in with the razor blade and scratch it all off. And just like that, the entire crack has been repaired. You don't have to worry about it spreading any further if you did it correctly. I'm gonna come over to the other side of the car real quick just to make sure I can get both angles. So again, same thing. All that being said, that's how to use the Rain-X windshield repair kit. If you got any questions, leave them in the comments. If I helped you out, let me know. I love to hear from people that I help. Other than that, I don't know, leave a comment, bro. What's up? Adios.
Go subscribe to the Cookie Boy, this baby.